Knew where the fault was, and when I was elected to the council, I was told that the buildings had been sort of fault-proofed. One of the buildings in the back had actually been, the slab had been cut in half, so that the fault was in the middle of the building. Half the building could go one way and half the building could go the other, okay? That had been fault-proofed. So at first, for the first 5 or 6 years at least on the council, I kind of figured we were okay, we had done the right thing. It was around that time the Northridge earthquake happened, and there were a whole bunch of questions about whether buildings that were like this, sort of concrete block slab buildings, were going to be strong enough or not. That raised some questions, but it was really more the issue that we started looking at how we were using the town center buildings, and we were getting more demand for classrooms. The library was asking for expansion space. The town staff had been working in the same small town school administration building for 25 years and needed a conference room. They had now just basically filled it. Our staff hadn't grown that much, but frankly, the file cabinets were filling it. We were just, increasingly having file cabinets and things. So they asked us to add a little bit onto the town hall and add a little conference room in the back. And we got one of the local architects did some free work for us pro bono to kind of show us where we could put the thing. But he told us at the time, you're going to need to have a geotechnical study done. And so we asked the town geologist to give us some geotechnical advice, and he said, my advice is just what it was 30 years ago. Move off this site. Move out of this footprint. This is bad. This place is bad. You can go pay somebody to go trench and find that fault, but I think you're making a mistake to even waste any money on it. We know where the fault is. Well, we were cautious about it, so we still ended up spending something like $100 grand for a first phase geotechnical study.
The flaws there were they were fundamentally working with buildings that were designed to much less rigorous codes, and they were working with buildings that were in the town's existing fault setback zones. So actually, progress did not go that far on that concept of expanding and upgrading those old structures before the town geologists recommended that the town, if it really wanted to pursue development of a town center with a new library, a new community building, a new town hall, that it looked carefully at this property as well as several other properties in the town to make sure it was making the best choice for the long-term vision of the town. And I believe Spangle and Associates looked at 10 different properties in the town. And they actually thought that this site was best if detailed studies could show that there was a safe building area on this property. And so, yeah, in the early 2001, 2002, 2003, the town retained a firm, William Lettuce and Associates, to do detailed fault investigations on this property. And they were able, as a result of that, to show that there was a buildable area on this western portion of the site that was outside of a fault rupture hazard zone. And that really, freeing up that area from fault rupture through these detailed studies is what really set the town on this path to this sort of building configuration.
And this is the funny thing about it, is that, when you live in southern Florida, you live with hurricanes. When you live in Kansas, you live with tornadoes. And you kind of predict that you can know when they're coming. Oh, you get 3 days notice when they're coming and things like that. But you don't know where they're necessarily coming. Here, the characteristic of this danger is we know exactly where it will be. We just don't know when. It could be any time, random choice. Well, if it's a where, then you can do building siting to deal with the where issue. And that's all we need to do, is we can sit there. And the great thing about it was we owned enough space here, we found out that we owned perfectly stable land, only a couple hundred yards away. I like to look at it as an opportunity, because what's happened is the Lord has offered us a situation that cannot continue, so we're going to have to basically start over and do it right. So we're getting a chance in 2007 rather than in 2020 when it falls down or something, to do it and do it right. And our citizenry has been incredible in giving us the money necessary to do it and do it right. So we're going to end up with this, with a town center that we can all be proud of and that our kids are going to benefit from for the next 25 or 50 or 75 years.
With this shovelful here, I'm breaking ground on behalf of the older generation who came and formed this town and had the wisdom to do this, and on behalf of the future generation that stands around me here, who will benefit from it, and benefit long into the future from it. Thank you all for coming, and with this, we do it. Come on.
And then we sort of asked ourselves, now, how should we build it? And there was a very strong universal sentiment on the council that we should do this as green and sustainable as possible, that we should show leadership and try to show how it should be done. I've always felt that one of the great things about this town was that we had done things before they were fashionable. When this town was first formed, we implemented these slope density regulations that said you couldn't build as big a house on a steep slope as you could on a flat piece of land of the same area. That the zoning would get sparser as you went up the hill, in effect, bigger lots, because they were going to be more visible. We implemented our own fault setback regulations before the state did, so that you couldn't build a house near the fault here before the state even recognized that was a risk factor and dealt with it at a state law level. We have repeatedly done that sort of things, and so as a consequence, this was another example. If you're going to build some buildings as a municipality, how do you show leadership? How do you do this the right way?
I mean, if you go back to the beginnings of the town, clearly the town was founded in part out of a concern to preserve open space and to avoid over-densification of our environment. And that value in turn has gotten expressed in any number of ways over the years with our slope density ordinance, with the fact that we have a garbage company that recycles everything you throw into the garbage can, to the fact that we have a procurement policy now in town that requires us to look for environmentally sustainable products. In general, this community has always, I think, tilted in the direction of a concern for environmental issues. And so there was plenty of momentum.
I mean, to me, it adds another layer to the design, the sort of aesthetic considerations that makes it more challenging, more fun, but kind of more real. It feels like you're not just designing some fantasy and then having someone else figure out how to make it work. You're having to think about how to make it work at the same time and make it work in a bigger context than just your project. You know, what's the context of the valley, the neighborhood, and even the planet? I mean, I think we have to start thinking in those levels or we're not going to make it. So that's sort of, we got into this I was doing this probably 30 years ago, first started studying this and looked at various types of alternative energy and things, and then I left it for a few years. And when I came back in the early 90s to look at this again, it was really because I couldn't stand designing another $100,000 kitchen for somebody. It wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, you know? So you feel like if you're going to do this job, which has a big impact on the world, building buildings has a big impact, you'd better figure out how to do it right. And so we started really looking at how to do it, and we started systematically researching materials. We got into that in the early 90s and looking at the impacts that different materials have, because in the 70s, people were mostly looking at energy, you know, solar energy and things like that. In the 90s, we started looking at energy and materials and water and all the other aspects that make up a holistic view of sustainability.
And frankly, for the last year or so, we've begun to realize, you know, we can do this more than green. We can do this really green. In other words, we can not only get a LEED certification, we can get a LEED Gold certification. We might even be able to get a LEED Platinum certification, okay? And so I have been in particular something of an irritant right now for the design team and the rest of the council by saying, we're only a point or two away from platinum here, and nobody in a municipal government has ever done a platinum building. Let's do it. This is a special community, let's do it special. Leadership means people have seen us do it to LEED Platinum, and say to themselves, why don't I build a house that's LEED Platinum? And so we'll end up with more houses. And the corporate titans of industry who live in this town are all going to see, hey, that's kind of a nice building, and it isn't made out of straw bales, and you know, it doesn't have a reed roof. This is a pretty nice building, and why don't I make my corporate headquarters that way? And so we end up leading in that way as well. And we end up being able to tell the people in San Mateo and Redwood City and Hayward and places where they're proposing to build municipal facilities, we did it for this number of dollars per square foot. It was actually cheaper than we expected, and it was below budget. And it's burning like much less energy each day than an ordinary building. So we could be, you know, pilots to other communities. And our kids will respect us for having done it.